Dennard Wilson, that was probably the biggest news from the weekend, that Ian Rappaport and a lot of the other insiders reported that the Eagles and quarterbacks coach, Dennard Wilson, also passing game coordinator, I believe, Dennard Wilson, have agreed to mutually part ways after he was passed over for the defensive coordinator job. Then Marcus Hayes comes out, writes a little article saying, hey, not so fast, my friends, the old Lee Corso bit, and says that Dennard Wilson was actually fired after an acrimonious meeting this weekend with Eagles head coach Nick Sirianni. Here is the quote. He fired popular and productive defensive backs coach Dennard Wilson on Saturday. 2 league sources confirmed Sirianni passed over Wilson in his exhaustive search to replace Gannon and hired Sean Desai instead. Wilson was understandably disappointed that he did not get the DC job. Sirianni knew this. Sources said Sirianni met with Wilson over the weekend for and receiving assurances that Wilson would cooperate with Desai. Yet Sirianni nevertheless was convinced that Wilson would not work well with Desai. This despite Wilson working well with Gannon, even though it seems like they didn't have the most kindred of spirits in the same defensive philosophy. So the Eagles are trying to point this as an amicable split. Untrue, according to sources. Wilson wanted to stay. Now let's just address who wrote this. Marcus Hayes. Say what you want about him. We've been pretty critical of the site ever since the site has been born. He really doesn't have that kind of leash that offers him the opportunity for people to believe every single source that he has. What did you make of this reading about it? This feels like an agent or a Dennard Wilson job. I don't know how you felt about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, for that reason, I'll go the other direction because I think everybody's knee-jerk reaction was just kind of, crap on the report because it's coming from Marcus, and Marcus has a history of saying things that people think are like, not true or just being hyperbolic or maybe being negative about some of this stuff. But I actually, not a red flag. I don't know what color flag is raised when you're like interested in something because, a lot of those national guys we know have, Howie's got their ear. Howie Roseman has their ear. So, when Schefter comes out with something that comes from Roseman, typically, like the Rappaports of this world and whatnot, that's where most of their information is coming from. So then when you get like an off chance report like this one that comes from somebody who's a columnist, not like a regular beat or like a national insider or whatever, it makes me wonder, it makes me think that there may actually be something to it just for the fact that Marcus is not in that network of like Howie Roseman regulars. Like I'm sure he's not a regular in Howie's phone, and Marcus never reports stuff like this anyway. So I go back to, I'm always cautious with this shit because when we go back to the Joe Santoliquito thing with Carson Wentz, for example, I was very, hesitant to have an early decision on that one way or another. I think we were pretty fair with that on the site. I guess that was before you joined up, but I wasn't going to like shit on Joe. I wasn't going to say this isn't true. It's definitely true or whatever. It's like, I've been there before, man. Like I had a good run breaking Philadelphia Union stories about 7 or 8 years ago. So I know from experience that all it takes is like one good source, and then like you're good, man. You start rolling in shit that's like accurate. And so I'm never going to come out and poo-poo somebody's sources because I've been there before and I know that it's like anybody can cultivate a source or get somebody on the inside or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, I think if that was the case, if Marcus was right about this, I think it would have perhaps been corroborated by somebody else by now. But I'm not going to sit here and like poo-poo the thing just because it's Marcus Hayes. So.
I've been tough on Marcus, but I am actually in the same boat as you are. This does interest me, and I think if you read down a little bit more into the story, it was talking about how much Dennard Wilson like challenged the guys and was able to kind of diffuse situations. There was supposedly a situation after the Cowboys game where obviously we saw that Darius Slay pointed the finger at Josiah Scott. Supposedly Dennard Wilson had a big hand in calming and diffusing that situation, maybe in the cornerback room and stuff. But then again, what I didn't like about the whole Marcus Hayes article was the title, really. Like he was talking about a potential mutiny against Nick Sirianni.
Well, that's where the hypothetical stuff, where I think it gets to be hyperbolic a little bit because nobody can say for sure. I mean, we can't say one way or another where there's going to be a friggin' mutiny or not. I mean, the only people who could say that are the defensive backs, right? So I think that's the problem where it's like, okay, maybe if there's something to this and your report is true, do you have to theorize that it may cause a mutiny, right? And he doesn't write, to be clear here, so everybody knows, they don't write, the Inquirer writers don't write their own headlines.
True.
So the second use of the word mutiny in the headline, that comes from an editor, but he did use it in his story. So I'm not like absolving anybody of, a connection to that for sure. But I don't know if there's going to be a friggin' mutiny. And only Darius Slay and CJ, GJ, and James Bradbury, who may not even be back, like they're the only ones who know if they
That's
would
true.
rebel against the new, yeah.
Marcus Epps, CJ, GJ, and James Bradbury, 75% of the Eagles defensive backs, Eagles secondary, are on the free agent market right now. So like you're 100% right. They might not even be back to stage this quote unquote mutiny. And there's some
they could they could very well, it could go any number of directions. Like CJ Gardner Johnson's an unrestricted free agent, James Bradbury's an unrestricted free agent, Slay seems like a portion of Eagles fans would be fine with trading him. Avonte Maddox is under contract. Who am I missing? Marcus Epps, right?
Epps.
Yeah. So yeah, that's a whole funny thing. They could lose their defensive backs coach and
their whole defensive secondary.